Hello everyone, happy Saturday. I'm so behind. I just got like everything done right before I switched over to here. Actually, I got one more thing I need to do. I'm just so behind. So behind. So sorry. One moment. Put out the at everyone. Then I will be done. How's everyone doing? How's your weekend? How's your week? I actually had some stuff going on this week. Did I do this? What am I doing? Um, Two things of note. One more second. I'm almost there. Almost there. I don't want to use that one. Oh no. I have to get my last minute notifications from on Discord that say, hey, I'm live. Make people happy. Then I'll be ready to go. All right, there we go. Sorry. All right, let's do this. Almost. Okay, here we go. All right, so what's happening with me? All right, so I didn't stream on Thursday, as some of you may be aware of. My air conditioning's on. Let me know if that bothers you, because it's still warmer than hell in this house. See, on Thursday I didn't stream because we went to Milwaukee because my wife is going through the citizenship process to become a U.S. citizen. So we got our message for her to go in and do the interview in Milwaukee, and that was on Thursday. So we kind of made a day of our time there in Milwaukee. So we got, oh my god, and then so we left early enough so we'd have like almost 40 minutes extra time just in case. And what also unfortunately kind of happened is that the Bucks seem to have won their the NBA or something like that. And I don't watch any of that stuff. But I'm not gonna. Oh, this is missing. So there was people all over the place. There was parts of the road just sectioned off, so we couldn't go by it. We literally, the wife, there's so many people and so much traffic redirected, and we weren't sure if we would get there on time. We were close enough, even through all that traffic. The wife said, "Fuck it." She jumped out of the car and she ran toward the building. And by the time the daughter and I got around, we actually caught up with her before she got to the building. So we were about the same. Her running through traffic and me running through the sidewalk, stuff like that, and us driving around just trying to find a way to get to the USCIS field office. So yeah, she went in there. It was in and out really quick. Well, once they took her appointment, it was in and out really quick. And then we went to the Van Gogh. Went to the Van Gogh, the Beyond Van Gogh thing, because my wife's she's into art. And so we went to that, and she was deeply moved by that whole experience. So it was neat, seeing Van Gogh. Like it's split off into 3 sections. The first section is quotes by him and his brother mainly, talking about him, and then some educational stuff talking about him and his journey through life and into art specifically. Then they had this kind of room where they got a whole bunch of moving stuff projected, just kind of showing kind of introduction to some of his art. Then the last one was this giant room, and they projected his art all around this room. I mean, it's like a gymnasium or larger, full of moving images of his artwork and things like that. So it was neat. It was neat. My wife really enjoyed it. So after that, we were pooped. So that was about an hour on our feet and all that sort of stuff. So we went home. And then when we got home, okay, all that stuff is done. And then the other thing that was happening on Thursday is that Warhammer 40K Battle Sector came out. So I got home, I started the download to get it installed, and then took my shower. By the time I get out with my shower, it was ready to go. and then I started playing it on Thursday. Played it all most of yesterday, and I played a little bit this morning. It's really cool. I'm enjoying it. I don't suck at it, so I could stream it. I mean, I don't know why I don't suck at it because I suck at these things, but yeah, I've been doing okay with it. So it's I guess we'll see what happens. Maybe I might. I've been considering trying to record it, and just record it and then put it on YouTube. That way you guys can go through it that way. 'Cause I've dumped, I don't know, 10 or 15 hours into it already since Thursday, and I'm still in the thick of it, thick of the campaign. I don't know how long the campaign is, how many missions it is, but I'm probably 15 missions into it or something like that. So yeah, that would be something that I could definitely stream or record and put out there. I might have to see if there's a difficulty setting, if I can increase the difficulty, because I mean, literally, at most I've lost maybe 1 or 2 units in each of the engagements, each of the missions. So really, I mean, if I'm only losing 1 or 2, and I suck tactically, then it's got to be pretty easy. So yeah, so we'll see. We'll see how that pans out. I tried recording it once, but I was having issues with OBS. I don't know why. Just gonna try and do a test, and it just didn't do it. So I don't know. It's working okay now. I'm here. I think I'm here at least. So yeah. All right. So that's me. That's Thursday. That's Friday. That's pretty much every moment up to now. How is everyone else doing? Hopefully your the rest of your week wasn't, and your Saturday wasn't quite as frenetic as mine is. And actually, my wife had to send some emails to some people at our studio. So I was doing that like literally as the intro was playing, and I got done with it like right as I had to get off. So abolish the U.S. Game Man, how you doing, man? Good to hear from you. Yeah, there's. U.S. is kind of problematic. Largest terrorist organization in the world. It's a problem. Nationalism in and of itself is such a fucking problem. It's one of those major diseases that we suffer with as a species. It separates us. It divides us. The most powerful things we can do is tear down those walls, Gorbachev. Tear down those walls of nationalism that divide us from each other. It's such a harmful thing that promotes racism and the desire to murder people of a different label. It's bad stuff. Bad stuff. How's your weekend going? Your gaming mind. I don't know if you heard my Thursday stuff. The wife we went and started the went to the INS USCIS to have my wife do the test for becoming a citizen. Meh, okay. What's up with you? Why are you just meh on a Saturday? It's hot out. Maybe that's part of it. And then Warhammer 40k Battle Sector came out on Thursday, so I've been busy playing that for hours and hours, hours. Yeah, it's still 70 in the house, the AC been going on nonstop. Although that's, I can't, if it's too much hard, if it's like 70, 71, I can stand it like in the winter because the heat is cold heat, but in the summer it's just horrible. Horrible. It's my delicate programmer in me needs to be babied with cool temperatures. Yeah, I found this article right as I was just checking my phone, right as the while the credits were running there. The intro was running. It's like, oh, okay. Actually, I was going to cover a bunch of coronavirus stuff first, but then had all these anti-capitalist stuff like this. So we're going to hit that first, and then we'll get into some coronavirus stuff if we have enough time. We'll see how this works. We shall see. But I found this, and it was like, oh, okay, this is cool. This is appropriate. Ugh. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get into this. China backs Cuba in saying the U.S. should apply sanctions to itself. This is no truer words could have been spoken. This is amazing. This is from the 23rd. This is from yesterday. It's on Newsweek. Get this larger without. Okay, there we go. All right. China has supported Cuba's argument that the United States should consider applying sanctions to itself for alleged human rights abuses before taking on other countries. And yeah, I mean, I've said something, I haven't said it quite like this, but the United States, you know, it's fairly hypocritical for the United States to be trying to police the world when we are one of the largest, well, we're the largest terrorist organization in the world, you know, engaging in coup after coup and all the other horrors that we do. It's not just, you know, globally, but here alone in the US with our police force being, if we're to total up, it's basically the third largest military organization in the world. The inequality problem, which in and of itself is a crime. The police getting away with murdering people is such a problem. And how it treats protesters. We saw that in Standing Rock. We've seen that in under what's his face? Orange Man Bad. Under Trump, right? We had the border people come here and just yank people off the streets in unmarked vans and stuff like that. Yeah, the United States needs to check our problems before trying to police the rest of the world. And that's a lot of what my policies are about. You know, fixing our problems in our country, and then we can help others as well. If we're a wreck, it's hard to fix up everyone else. Help fix everyone else. And that's what my policies are all aimed at. Fix all the stuff, then others will follow. All right. Speaking Friday at a press conference in Beijing, China Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian asserted that his country firmly supports the efforts of the Cuban government and people to maintain social stability as President Joe Biden doubles down to pressure Cuba in the wake of historic protests in the island nation. Oh my God. I normally have my phone on vibrate because I don't like the loudness, but it stopped vibrating. So I had to have the actual ringer on, which is super annoying. All right, the latest measures unveiled Thursday include sanctions against the head of the Cuban Armed Forces and a division of the Interior Ministry in response to their suspected roles in cracking down on the demonstrations. The U.S. leader warned that this is just the beginning and that the United States will continue to sanction individuals responsible for oppression of the Cuban people. There's the pot calling the kettle black, I suppose. Zhao lashed out against the approach the following day. We resolutely reject any external interference in other countries' internal affairs, imposition of unilateral sanctions, and attempt to gang up on other countries under the pretext of, quote, freedom, democracy, and human rights, Zhao said. And he referenced early remarks on Twitter by Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez, who dismissed the unfounded and slanderous U.S. government sanctions and suggested that the country should rather apply unto itself the Magnitsky Global Act for systemic repression and police brutality that took the lives of 1,021 persons in 2020. Oh, you're back? The phone died? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, phone dying. That sucks. my phone almost died yesterday. I used it for GPS, which is like it's almost a 2-hour drive up to INS, where my wife was going through the interview for citizenship. Well, I don't want to say almost died. I got to 50%, and then the wife used hers. Your phone. Sanctions for human rights, but also we run Guantanamo. Yes, seems, yeah, exactly. Guantanamo, is it Guantanamo, or is it another base that's in Cuba? Isn't it? It wasn't Gitmo there, or is that what Gitmo is? I've seen that several times, right? Gitmo. Okay, it is Guantanamo Bay. Okay, there we go. Yeah, exactly. We still got that. Prisoners there who have no representation and have been there for 10, 15, 20 years or whatever it's been. Yeah, exactly. It's so much hypocrisy there. The legislation has been used by the White House to roll out restrictions on finances and travel for individuals accused of corruption and human rights abuses, but Zhao said it was Washington that fits this bill. True statement. The U.S. should first and foremost examine its own human rights issues, Zhao said, instead of wielding the big stick of sanctions, grossly interfering in others' internal affairs and creating division or confrontation. Okay, sure. Good stuff there. Perhaps end Guantanamo Bay, set those people free. He then issued a plea for Washington to remove its decades-long trade embargo on Havana. China maintains that mutual respect, fairness, justice, and win-win cooperation are the right way to conduct state-to-state relations, Zhao said. At present, Cuba is at a critical moment in its fight against COVID-19 and its efforts to alleviate people's suffering. The U.S. must immediately and completely lift unilateral sanctions against Cuba in compliance with the purposes of the UN Charter and basic norms governing international relations, and do more to improve U.S.-Cuba relations and contribute to international and regional stability. But communism! But communism! And when I was asking the wife, we have this part of the citizenship process. They've got 100-question thing about history and government and civics and that sort of a thing that we went through. I've asked her, some of the questions several times, and whenever we get to Russia, I would just because it would ask about the Cold War and things like that. The communists, because my wife's from Belarus, from a former Soviet bloc country, so it's pretty funny. But I was entertained at least. Sanctions against Cuba date back to the Cold War, at a time when revolutionary Fidel Castro adopted communism shortly after his 1959 revolution. The uprising took place a decade after founding of the People's Republic under Chinese leader Mao Zedong. Washington would not recognize Beijing either until 3 decades later. Yeah, it's not the sanctions, it must be communism. Yes, that's why. Yeah. I've seen that too, and that's. Yeah, it's hard to really isolate what is really causing. It's not that communism and a sort of autocratic regime isn't going to have its issues, and they do, but the sanctions that we have placed upon them, especially the United States is one of the largest economies in the world, and if they had access to it, it might make their lives a little bit better. I saw one thing saying that they've got amazing medical care, but it's hard for them to do that because they can't get access to needles or something like that for vaccines. Yeah, and another thing I've seen, if the United States is so afraid of communism, wouldn't it be best just to show how horrible it is? Just let it free and let it run and wreck itself? And then, especially in a small island nation, what do we have to be afraid of communism running wild in Cuba when it's such a small country? Why not just let it go and people can go, see, it's broken. But alas, no. U.S. trade restrictions against Cuba were briefly eased during the administration of former President Barack Obama, who President Joe Biden served under as a vice president, but were later reinstated under former President Orange Man Bad. The measures remain in place today despite Biden's past support for rapprochement with Havana. Yeah, and he could just lift this just like that. because he controls the State Department. The Biden administration has set out to conduct a review of its Cuba policy and has yet to release the results. The latest messaging, however, indicates an even tougher stance against Cuba to come. Oh, what do you mean, a regime change? A coup? But by the State Department's own acknowledgement, there has been little sign of a change in the Cuban government's behavior. We haven't seen that kind of response, Secretary of State Antony Blinken told MSNBC on Friday. The regime tends to double down in these situations, but again, this is not about us. Oh, I mean the United States didn't double down in these kinds of situations? But it is about us. It is about the United States. It is about our sanctions. But it is. What Havana has done is laid the blame for social unrest on largely US-based social campaigns and attribute economic shortcomings on Washington's embargo, which has received global condemnation, including in the former and near unanimous 184-2 United Nations General Assembly vote last month. Yeah, we covered that. Of course, it was... it was Israel. It was Israel and the United States that voted against lifting the sanctions, right? And everyone else said yes. Yeah, with only the US and Israel voting against it. Brazil, Colombia, and Ukraine abstained. President Biden does not support the Cuban people. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel tweeted Friday alongside a video of an anti-embargo demonstration in New York City. His government maintains the policy responsible for the economic shortages and suffering of millions of Cuban families. The coercive measures that seek to render our people out of hunger and necessity will not subdue sovereign Cuba. Blinken, for his part, called it the wrong way to address the situation. Okay. Good. Yeah, I think one of the big mistakes the regime makes is to try to point the finger at the United States, saying we're responsible for these protests. We're not, Blinken said Friday. These are the Cuban people. They are speaking up. They're speaking out. They're standing up, and a regime that doesn't understand that and lacks the confidence to allow the voices of its own people to be heard, I think is making a very big mistake. Well, we could say this all about the United States as well. And aren't some of the protesters actually against the United States? I think that's what some of the protests are about. The United States and the problems that we're causing through our sanctions. Yeah. My God. How many? I mean, just the majority of people in this country support the majority of Bernie Sanders'. The pro-evolution protests are bigger. Oh, are they? Okay. Good to know. Yeah, I haven't really covered too many articles on this. But if you have a good one on it, go and throw it in here. We can take a look at it. Pro-evolution. Okay. Do you know what specifically they're saying about what about the revolution? Are they trying to get rid of the communist, or it's not even communist, socialist? Or is it not so much the socialism as it is the autocratic government? I know there was some talking about not enough food. Even the healthcare is good, but it can be better. I think I've seen some of that. Possibly. Beijing, too, has accused Washington of meddling in its affairs. And on Friday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry also released a statement criticizing U.S. sanctions on officials attached to the central government's liaison office to Hong Kong, a semi-autonomous special administrative region that the Biden administration, like that of Trump before it, has steadily lost its self-rule after a crackdown on mass protests cheered on by the West. The ministry said it firmly opposes and strongly condemns the latest moves by Washington. Okay. The U.S. has concocted the so-called Hong Kong Business Advisory to groundlessly smear Hong Kong business environment and illegally impose sanctions on several officials of the liaison office of the Central People's Government in the Hong Kong something administrative. Actually, I don't know what that stands for. These acts gravely violate international law and basic norms governing international relations and severely interfere in China's internal affairs. Okay. In response, it expanded its own counter-campaign of economic restrictions targeting 7 academics and former officials critical of the People's Republic. I would like to stress once again that Hong Kong is China's special administrative region, and its affairs are an integral part of China's internal affairs, the statement said. Any attempt by external forces to interfere in Hong Kong's affairs would be as futile as an ant trying to shake a big tree. They wouldn't be saying anything if it didn't have an effect. Okay, so they're kind of using this. They side with Cuba because they're socialist communist, right? So there's that support, but ultimately their support also has a lot to do here with Tibet, right? With Hong Kong, Taiwan, right? And those sorts of things as well. The move comes 2 days before Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman was set to arrive in China Sunday for talks. State Department spokesperson Ned Price recently said she would come from a position of strength and cover potentially competitive elements, the adversarial elements, but also the potentially cooperative elements of their bilateral relationship. Okay. Oh, well, there's more. I got there's more. All right, almost done. Zhao rejected this framing on Friday as defining China as a competitor, stoking confrontation and containing and suppressing China's development. He also said the position of strength motto reflects U.S.'s arrogance and bullying. Okay. China always believes that China-U.S. relations should be based on mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit rather than one side taking the benefit only. Zhao said the development of China-U.S. relations needs a guardrail, but it cannot be defined by the U.S. unilaterally. The U.S. should stop interfering in China's internal affairs, stop smearing China, and harming China's interest. When Sherman does arrive, he said Beijing will continue to elaborate on China's principled position on developing China-U.S. relations and firmly safeguard sovereignty, security, and development interests. Okay, so I'm sure part of this is going to be sending more of our business overseas so that, the corporations can make billions while the people here suffer in this country. The people suffer there too, because not having OSHA and other workers' rights and stuff like that. Okay, so there is that. It's good that they're saying it. More people need to be saying this as well. If the rest of Europe got in on this, might actually see a little bit of change in this country, but the rest of Europe won't stand up and do it because they're afraid. All right, now we'll move on to Jeff Bezos and his ridiculous vanity marketing experience. Covered a little bit before, we'll cover it a little bit more. We got 1 or 2 articles on this, and then we will move on. Right, 1 or 2? Yes, 1 or 2. Yeah, this is it's so ridiculous. He didn't even go in space. He was in the upper atmosphere, not space. And the media is just turning it into something that's like, oh wow, man, it's a new era for space in the United States, man. Ugh, it's nothing. Jeff Bezos' Vanity spaceflight was a uniquely American disgrace. Vanity is exactly right, and I've said that before. It's a vanity play, nothing more. Only in a country whose ruling class has grown deeply deluded could a space joyride like Jeff Bezos's be seen as a cause for public celebration, rather than the symptom of moral rot and institutional decay that it so clearly is. Okay, Jeff Bezos holds the aviation glasses that belong to Amelia Earhart as he speaks during a press conference about his flight on Blue Origin's New Shepard. I was wondering, this looks pretty old. Ugh. All right. Tom Lehrer famously remarked that satire became obsolete when Henry Kissinger was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Oh, did he fucking really? Oh my god. That's horrific. I suppose Obama was too, and that, God. I voted for Obama, and truly a great inspiration. The climate is collapsing, infrastructure getting worse, but hey, what speaks against a joyride of the very people who are responsible for this bullshit. It is totally inspiring, mind-blowing. God. Even, I voted for Obama, but even I was like, he hasn't even fucking done anything yet. I think he just got into office and he was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. It just didn't make any fucking sense. Everyone was all caught up in the, Obama and the Obama thing, right? And it's like, what? Come on, guys. Do better. And then Henry Kissinger awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. That's just stunning. Stunning. War criminals getting peace prizes. Good stuff. In a similar vein, I've increasingly found it difficult to come up with creative new ways of writing about the depredations of American inequality and the billionaire class that has been able to enrich itself so obscenely while hundreds of thousands have perished from a deadly disease. How exactly are you supposed to describe this stuff except in the most prosaic and literal way? Told this to a friend in high school once and he thought I was bullshitting him. Yeah, no, this is the first time I've heard about it, and it's like, you gotta be kidding me. How is that a thing? I just can't. It makes you really start to think significantly less about what the Nobel Peace Prize is really about. I don't know. It's stunning. People in the world's richest country are quite literally going hungry, and the economy is somehow creating new billionaires while making the existing ones even richer. 7 million people are about to face eviction, and the wealthiest man in human history just bought himself a personal yacht. It cost the equivalent of a Hollywood blockbuster, $500 million, now being basically pocket change for a guy like Jeff Bezos. He just bought a fucking yacht for $500 million. Yeah, I saw this article, I think it's on Twitter? No, it's on Facebook, that it basically showed how much each of the Marvel blockbusters cost. Kind of the average for like some of the series and some of the movies is like, not the average, kind of the lowest is 150, 160 million. And some of them went up to like 245, 300 million, right? To make these movies. And this is far beyond that. You could make 3 Marvel movies for the price of this yacht. Oh my God. Yeah, capitalism. It's just emerged that Americans owe around 140 billion in medical debt to collections agencies, some which could be taxed away from Bezos' wealth while still leaving his net worth at 64 billion or so. The skies of North American cities are beset by noxious haze from wildfires, yet Congress is so captured by corporate interests that even modest action on climate change is written off like some kind of boutique political demand. Yep. Throw a few billionaire space flights in the mix, and the words truly start to fail. The evils and inequalities of America's economic system have often been quite nakedly obvious, but plutocrats engaging in a phony private space race, while the planet scorches and feudalism reasserts itself amid a global plague, is so gobsmackingly overt it requires no further elaboration. To add to the general aura of unreality, mainstream sources of officialdom and opinion making from the Biden administration to cable news have been content to discuss recent billionaire vanity outings as if they're somehow major public achievements. The United States is the first country to have private companies taking private individuals to space, remarked White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki of Bezos' approximately 10-minute sojourn into the atmosphere. Yeah, this is exactly it. He's in the atmosphere, not fucking space. And the other thing, right? And Neil deGrasse Tyson talked about this in one of his speech that, when it comes to things like this, going into space, the government, U.S. government specifically, is the one who creates the technology, researches the technology, and pioneers the whole thing. And then after the government has done their thing, just opening that hole and doing the research and all that sort of stuff, that, you know, decades later it becomes something that becomes economically viable enough for, yeah, NDT. Oh yeah, it's let me see, it's in. Yeah, and if you haven't watched this one yet, I really enjoyed this speech of his. Yeah, at the 28th symposium. This is where he talks about it, and talks about space as important to culture and important to so many things. And this here is the speech that had me allowed me to finish my policies and give it its name. I talk about that in here as well, about that very thing, and I link back to this. That, you know, I was trying to come up with a name with my policies, and after I read this, I had to have an interstellar humanity policy, and then I named my policies Interstellar New Deal. Such a great speech, and he's really kind of cranky in here. It's kind of interesting to see. And also, if you go to the link, I've got the transcript there too, with some images as well. So if you don't want to read it, if you want to listen to it, you can read it. So all that's there too. Yes. Yeah. Enjoy. This is a moment of American exceptionalism. Oh my God. That's how we see it. It will be the ingenuity of all our commercial partners to help us continue advancing to the next stage of our nation's space exploration. Investments in space create jobs. They can improve life here on Earth through climate monitoring and medical advancements, just to name a few. Fucking Jesus Christ. Okay, so first of all, it doesn't have to be that space is privatized. The US government would start putting billions in, you know, double, triple, quintuple NASA's budget, and it wouldn't have to be the private companies doing it. Again, as I talk about in my policies, we could start funding an orbital loop, mass drivers to throw things in space. We could do a space elevator hanging from an asteroid or something like that. There's all sorts of things we could be doing, and we should be doing, that private companies are doing now. And there's like this one criticism I've seen, and so like Jeff Bezos and the whole Congress thing, passing a $10 billion basically giveaway to him, right? You know, NASA has been struggling year after year to get funding, and then if a billionaire wants $10 billion for space, they fucking get it. Oh, do I have that linked in here? Let's look at the NASA budget. Yeah, I have a link to here in my policies. You can see it there. Budget of NASA. Here we go. So yeah, here's the budget of NASA over time. 58. Okay, so here's percentage of federal budget. All right, so at its height, it's 4.41% at 447 billion. Yeah, 47 billion at its height. Now, and which is 4.41. Now it's half that. 22 billion. It's half. Hold on. Yeah, 42 billion. Yeah, it's half what it was way back then, but it's only, 0.48% of the total budget. Now, if it were kept at the 4.4%, it'd be, well, it's gotta be shitload more than this. It would probably near $1 trillion or something like that for space, because the percentage has gone down significantly. And yet, Bezos was given 10 billion. Guess what? That's almost half. That's almost half of the NASA budget was just given to Bezos. Although later this was all found out and he wasn't given that money, but he almost got it through buying a congressperson, right? Network morning shows, meanwhile, collectively devoted over 200 minutes to giving Bezos' launch into the full infomercial treatment. One analysis showing that the nearly equivalent to all the time those shows spent covering climate change throughout the whole of last year. The billionaire, for what it's worth, did his utmost to brand the trip as a voyage of discovery undertaken in the common good, a narrative which met little pushback from the networks. Yeah, some have done a little bit, but ultimately they should have ripped him apart for the fucking marketing. Again, he didn't go into space, he went into the fucking upper atmosphere. And they should have brought in the $10 billion from the congressperson and all that sort of stuff. They should have ripped him apart if they actually cared about anything. But they don't. They're paid. They're paid for. Bought and paid for. Fittingly then, the same national media which so blithely dismiss an idea like universal public health insurance as a quixotic leftist pipe dream found plenty of time to humor the lunatic ravings about moving heavy industry into space offered by Bezos upon his return. Oh yeah, I heard that. What he said? Oh, okay. He said we should move industry Bezos into industry. Yeah, he said we should move industry, polluting industry into space. Yeah. We can move all heavy industry and all polluting industry off the Earth. Okay. So then we can pollute space. Good stuff. Now, how about instead of moving everything off the Earth, if we just engage in sustainable development? How about if we just do that instead? Sustainable energy, sustainable processes, go shift to an entirely regenerative, open source, circular economy. How about we do that instead? Because that'll work. That'll make sure all of our industry works on the Earth and it works on any other planet that we happen to land in. Okay, is Twitch crashing? Can you hear me? Okay, it's still there. It's having a little bit of problems. So how about we do that instead? Seems fine. Okay. All right, good. So, there isn't a huge benefit to moving industry into space if you're going to bring it back down. There could be some places where it could, if we had a space elevator, if we had an orbital loop. There might be some advantage to having some industry in space because of the unique properties of developing something in space, right? Because the zero-G, the microgravity or whatever, might make certain things better or more, resilient or whatever, right? Sure, okay, fine. But moving it off to prevent polluting the environment misses the whole fucking problem. But by and large, if any industry move into space, should be there to fund the space, the space infrastructure, not the infrastructure here on the Earth. Okay, the spectacle of the world's richest corporate overlord donning a blue jumpsuit. Okay, this is not spelled correctly. Should be donning, D-O-N-N-I-N-G. Corporate overlord donning a blue jumpsuit and launching himself in a phallically shaped rocket is already about as absurdly burlesque as it comes. In the current national and global climate, however, the episode came with an extra dollop of dystopianism courtesy of America's media and political leadership. Only in a country whose ruling class has grown deeply deluded could such an obvious symptom of moral rot and institutional decay be registered as a cause for public celebration. True dat. Jeff Bezos' hobby flight, like Richard Branson's before it, I don't even remember his. I suppose he may not have as much money as Bezos in order to purchase the airtime and coverage of this. Yeah, I don't even remember it. Was not a stunning human achievement, but rather a uniquely American disgrace in a society less anesthetized by spectacle and less determined to cling to nostalgic fables of national exceptionalism. At least some hint of this might have broken through the facade. Instead, the barons of America's second Gilded Age are taking their depredations into the atmosphere, and we're all invited to clap. Yes. Yeah, it's a vanity ploy, and it is a ploy for... It's actually a very expensive marketing ploy as well. Got a 2-for-1 out of that deal. And as I say here, right, and this is important, in my post on talking about capitalism and resource-based economies. No, this is my post on how, if a resource-based economy was going to be a thing, how would it happen? I talk about. Well, actually, let me go ahead and let's go ahead and bring this up. So I think this is important. Ooh. Okay, I'm gonna read this here from my post here. So when thinking about writing the second part of this 2-part post, I found that it was interesting that it was much easier to think about how to evolve humanity into an interstellar species than it was to try to think about trying to get humanity to shift to a resource-based economy. Why is this? Well, taking humanity to the stars is merely a purely engineering problem whose process was almost fractal in nature, has a repeatable process to each stage. Whereas shifting humanity to agree to stop doing everything it can to destroy itself at the fastest possible rate and to become a globalized civilization drenched in peace and cooperation requires something infinitely more difficult. Something that is not merely a technical or logistical problem. Something that is truly, at its core, a societal values problem, which is the hardest thing to change. As I've been saying all throughout this 2-post document, we have the knowledge, the technology, and the resources to do this today. The final question becomes, can we evolve or develop the values needed for it? This is important because the long-term implications of thinking this far out about humanity's potential future as a potential interstellar civilization, which I also hope will help to reinforce the importance of shifting to a resource-based economy for humanity's long-term survival. And then I've got my excerpt here from that page, and I'm gonna go ahead and read this because this is. I'm having buffering issues, it looks like. At least on my local computer. I'm not dropping anything. Okay, it's just me. It's gotta be just me. All right, so I say interdependence and spacefaring humanity as below on Earth, so it shall be above in space. Now, the key thing, of course, here is that, if we bring capitalism into space, we're bringing capitalism into space. And just because, people idealize, living in a space station or a foreign, a Martian colony, doesn't mean anything's going to change. Things will not change unless we actually change things. And what, the billionaires in their space race isn't actually going to change things or make anything better. Like Musk going to Mars, guess what? It's going to be a capitalist hellscape, just like it is here. And it's going to be significantly worse, because it's much harder to do that than it is to deal with it here. Okay. Humanity carries its cultural, theological, emotional, intellectual, and social baggage with it wherever it goes, which creates perpetual strife, exploitation, and conflict. If we cannot live in harmony here on our planet of origin, then we will never be able to live in any semblance of harmony in a space station or anywhere else in the universe. This is the Star Trek versus the Expanse conundrum. The only real way to accomplish peace in space is to create peace here on Earth. As a globalized species, we need to advocate for a change in humanity's social, environmental, political, and economic systems so that we can save ourselves and our planet of origin from our own self-inflicted horrors and the systems and structures that created them. Otherwise, we shall never know peace, even as much as we would like to idealize life in space and space colonies. Nothing will change with humanity in space if we do not ourselves change. I need to change that here. Change here on Earth. That's kind of an important thing. Have to add that. The entirety of my policies here on Interstellar New Deal are aimed at just that, creating all those changes so that humanity may finally know peace on Earth and wherever we shall find ourselves throughout the universe. I'll go ahead and throw that in there. So that's this whole space thing. And also in when I was part of the space nation of Asgardia and I ran for parliament and all that sort of stuff, this is pretty much what I said there as well. I mean, because I was pro resource-based economy as far as what they should do for that micronation, and I said much the same things. And if you go to my blog, you can kind of see all the links to all of my writings for the space nation. If you don't have peace here on Earth, you're not going to have peace in space, and it's just delusional to think otherwise. And again, they're not willing to tackle the capitalism problem because the guys who started it is a Russian oligarch, a space oligarch. He's from the Sputnik program or whatever. So, you know, if he's going to benefit from capitalism, it's hard to be willing to question it. All right. One more article on Bezos. This refers to his, of course, comment about how the Amazon customers and the employees of Amazon funded his trip into space. Which, yeah, okay. Poverty, wages, and tax dodging funded Bezos's ridiculous space trip. And we covered his Roth IRA thing, right? And ProPublica covered him as well. All right, questions, comments, and suggestions before I move on. I'm just kind of tearing through this. Right now, I'm honestly just thinking about Battle Sector, playing it. Oh, and my computer. This is also something important. No, actually, it wasn't OBS that was giving me problems. Why I couldn't, I was trying to do. I was thinking about recording, or actually, no, I was thinking of editing. No, I was gonna edit one of my previous. I was gonna edit last week's video from my stream, try and cut it apart and possibly post it to YouTube. But DaVinci Resolve wasn't working because of the video driver problem. I have an older NVIDIA 760, and with the latest version of DaVinci Resolve for video editing, it wasn't working properly, so I couldn't do anything. Either I had to reduce the version of DaVinci Resolve, or basically get a new video card. Now I need to get a new video card, I really do, but it's just, I was gonna go ahead and do that, take the time to do that, but I couldn't. So now I got to figure out what I'm going to do. Either I'm going to have to downgrade my DaVinci Resolve, which is annoying, or get a new video card. And well, I'm going to get a new video card. It's just a matter of when. So that was annoying. All right. Jeff Bezos' 10-minute trip to space has inspired a myriad of reactions, from boredom to anger to a surge of space penis memes, making fun of the shape of his rocket. I am mortally certain that this was not the reception Bezos, the richest person on the earth, was hoping for, and I hope that the world's unimpressed reaction is followed by greater scrutiny of Bezos' wealth, why he has it, and why we live under a system that makes it possible for anyone to hold over $200 billion while paying virtually no taxes. Yeah, and I was completely nonplussed by the whole thing. Reports, Bezos has been obsessed with space for 30 years. That's good. Okay. That's cool. And spent a small fortune, a pittance to him, it is to be noted, almost but not quite getting there. After his billionaire rival Richard Branson pulled a similar stunt 10 days ago. Oh, did he? You'd have thought from the media coverage that Branson had landed on the moon and discovered cold fusion in a crater. That's funny. Did he go to space? I had no idea Branson did. That's how much I don't care. Okay, well, there you go. I guess he did. The coverage of the coverage of the Bezos fling was about as exciting as this cat meme, and all he got for his troubles in the end were enough penis jokes to last 10 lifetimes. You'd think the owner of the Washington Post would rate more ink from his colleagues in the biz, but alas for Bezos, he has learned a hard but unavoidable lesson. Almost no one remembers someone who does something for the second time. Or in this case, the third time, or the fourth or fifth or sixth time. Well, I suppose not too many people have gone to almost space, right? I mean, few people have done it, or obviously we have, and everyone has attempted to go to space as far as their, national space race. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing newsworthy about what they've done. It's more just a test of their infrastructure than anything. That's how it should be covered, as a test of infrastructure. And Bezos and Branson saying, hey, I believe in this so much, our infrastructure, that I'm just going to go up myself just to show everything's good. And that's as far as it should have been covered. Case in point, in a pop quiz, no Googling the answer, you. It is universally known that Neil Armstrong was the first astronaut to step on the surface of the moon during the Apollo 11 mission. Who was the first astronaut out the door of Apollo 12? The second mission to land on the moon? Answer, Charles Pete Conrad. Extra points. What did they say after stepping out of the spacecraft? Answer, whoopee! Don't worry, I had to look it up too. No disrespect meant to astronaut Conrad, who did it right. Yes, yet as ridiculous as Bezos' space coffee break was, I still get occasional pushback when I refer to people like him and Branson, who almost pay nothing in taxes annually, as tax cheats. They aren't cheating, I am told, but are playing by the laws as they find them. Change the laws if you don't like them. Yeah, I mean, this is fair, right? I mean, this is what the laws are, and they're using the laws, what they're doing is legal, right? I mean, I've studied tax mitigation strategies for stuff like that, so I get that, and they're not wrong, right? I mean, but should the system be that way? That's the fundamental problem. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. That shouldn't be it. That shouldn't be a thing. That is the big travesty here. Well, that right there is the thing. Most of us aren't billionaires who can afford to financially adopt the kind of powerful politicians who can rewrite the tax codes in our favor. What do you call a system where rich people pay Congress members to do just that? I call it cheating. And sleep like a baby at night. If I slip a few Benjamins into the home plate umpire so he'll expand the strike zone for my pitcher during the game, I am cheating. And that is this. Such behavior has launched Bezos into an economic atmosphere no spacecraft can reach, whatever shape it may hold. In 1 second, Bezos makes as much or more money than the average worker pulls down in a week. In a minute, he makes more than the average worker earns in a year. Based on the median net worth of an average U.S. household, an average American spending $1 is roughly equivalent to Bezos spending $1.95 million, reports Business Insider. The Amazon CEO's net worth took a hit of more than $10 billion in 2019, and he still didn't lose his spot on the world's richest person. Can I do low? Yeah, I keep buffering. I'm gonna see if I can lower this. No latency. It is. Okay. Yes, Bezos has donated some of his money. After many years of not giving much of his fortune away, he and his then wife have donated $2 billion to combat homelessness and improve education, gave $200 million to the Smithsonian Institutions, National Air and Space Museum, and pledged $10 billion to combat the climate crisis since 2018. Okay, we've gone over this philanthropy stuff, right? How the philanthropy is a fraud and that sort of a thing. So this is, them paying for bonuses and perks and getting their names on stuff and so on. Now, if they really gave a flying fuck about making change, they would be buying their Congress people, right, to support work on climate change, support on actually public housing and things of that nature, not giving themselves $10 billion for their space penis race. Again, this is that tension issue within capitalism, right? Tension within methods of exchange. I keep sharing it. I'm not going to share it now because you guys all know it. If someone wants me to share it, let me know and I'll do it. This is great, but it represents an infinitesimal portion of his fortune. Thanks to the magic of compound interest, his own money will make that money back for him in the time it takes to drive to Nana's house. Instead of lauding Bezos' late-blooming philanthropy, we should be asking ourselves, why is it okay for anyone to have the amount of money that Bezos has when so much of the world has so little? Yeah, and it's, any society which has any level of poverty is a complete and total failure. The existence of philanthropy and the existence of charity means our society has failed. It means people are suffering and there's no reason for it when we've got asshats like this who are buying a $500 million yacht, which is more than like 3 Hollywood blockbusters put together. It shouldn't be a thing. There shouldn't be exorbitant richness while people at the bottom are dying and suffering. Moreover, we should consider the manner in which that fortune was amassed. Amazon, Bezos' massive company, came to be a $1.5 trillion economic juggernaut by using brazenly monopolistic tactics to either buy up rivals and run them off the road. The company pays almost nothing in taxes, and to pad the bottom line, Amazon has become one of the most notorious union-busting corporations on the earth. Yeah, and this is one of the big problems here with capitalism and that whole, capitalism thrives on innovation and stuff, but it ends up with monopolies that eventually have enough money to buy up their rivals, right? Or to run them out of business. It's not good for your bottom line to have competition, right? So they do whatever it takes to get rid of them. Recently, Amazon won a closely watched National Labor Relations Board election against the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union at a warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama. John Logan reported for Truthout in May. But it did so only after spending millions of dollars on harassing and intimidating its workers for 2 months before the vote. Now, the company is using the same strategy to bust a new independent union drive at its Staten Island facility in New York. Of course they are. Before embarking on his little trip, Bezos made word noises that seem to indicate he kind of gets it. When asked if these joyrides for the wealthy waste money that could be used to help people on Earth, he replied, "Well, I say they're largely right. We have to do both. We have lots of problems here and now on Earth, and we need to work on those. And we always need to look to the future. We've always done that as a species, as a civilization. We have to do both." Yeah, and of course, we also have the issue, as we've talked about here before, that just taking these joyrides into space adds a shitload of carbon dioxide into the air as well, right? Joyride, it's irresponsible. We have to do both, so long as I get to play with my toys first. Exactly. It was a politician's answer. The kind of pablum senators spout to reporters before the elevator doors close. I believe Bezos and his ilk mean it if I never ever hear talk about low orbit billboards advertising Amazon products or about corporate logos. Come to think of it, the Amazon logo also has some strange penis action going on, visible on the moon. I fear that is where we are headed, because Bezos and Branson did not do this for the sake of discovery or exploration. They were clear. This was a step toward the commercialization of space, and I want no part of that. Exactly. And this is, I talked about that earlier, right? Capitalism will do nothing good for space. We're heading for the issue of the Expanse. If you haven't watched the Expanse, watch it, because there in the Expanse, it's Mars versus Earth versus the Belters, right? In one huge clusterfuck. As long as people are competing and they are not cooperating, peace and violence, peace will not be possible and violence will be inevitable. Violence and exploitation is an inherent and visceral part of capitalism and monetary systems. Again, I am not alone. What Branson's and Bezos' baby jaunts into the sky represent is not progress, writes Barry Pacheski for Defector. They are not about exploration or knowledge. They are money-making ventures. They are, as initially envisioned, about the promise of spaceflight tourism. They are symbolic, but of a future and a present, where only the extremely wealthy can get a taste of the peak awe that humanity is capable of feeling. Yeah, and wasn't there like a 20 or 30-year-old rich person's son? Didn't he go up with Bezos into space? And I think I read that their parents or whatever, or this person paid like 28 million for the opportunity to go in space. Well, go in the upper atmosphere, right? Yep, we the people won't have access to this, just the rich people, as always. Meanwhile, billionaires like Bezos made your yearly salary 3 times over in the minutes it took you to read this article. Launch that into space. There you go. All right, so there's that. We're done with that. Got this two more things on the joys of capitalism. Because we love capitalism here, don't we, peeps? Yeah, we do. Oh, yeah, we do. What is this from? Oh, this is David Graeber. Okay, so this has got to be a little bit old. This is from... Oh, I didn't realize it was David Graeber. It sounded like something that David Graeber had written, because I've... Okay, this is 2016. 2016. This is by David Graeber, the guy of Bullshit Jobs. Whoa. And I have not read his book. I do need to read his book, though. The thing about these sorts of books, I don't like listening to them on like Audible. Like I listen to novels and stuff on Audible because I don't have to remember anything. I read a serious book, I want to read it, cram it into my brain, you know, in 1 or 2 settings, and then move from there. All right, why capitalism creates pointless jobs. It's as if someone were out there making pointless jobs for the sake of keeping us all working. In the year 1930, John Maynard Keynes predicted that technology would have advanced sufficiently by century's end that countries like Great Britain or the United States would achieve a 15-hour work week. Whoa. There is every reason to believe he was right. In technological terms, we are quite capable of this. And yet it didn't happen. Instead, technology has been marshaled, if anything, to figure out ways to make us all work more. In order to achieve this, jobs have had to be created that are effectively pointless. Huge swaths of people, in Europe and North America in particular, spend their entire working lives performing tasks they secretly believe do not really need to be performed. The moral and spiritual damage that comes from this situation is profound. It is a scar across our collective soul, yet virtually no one talks about it. Why did Keynes's promised utopia, still being eagerly awaited in the 60s, never materialize? Standard line today is that he didn't figure in the massive increase in consumerism. Given the choice between less hours and more toys and pleasures, we've collectively chosen the latter. This presents a nice morality tale, but even a moment's reflection shows it can't really be true. Yes, we have witnessed the creation of an endless variety of new jobs and industries since the 20s, but very few have anything to do with the production and distribution of sushi, iPhones, or fancy sneakers. And most of it has to do with advertising and profit, and not actual things that are useful. Like banking itself is a total fucking waste of space. The insurance industry, a waste of space. Advertising, a waste of space. So what are these new jobs precisely? A recent report comparing employment in the US between 1910 and 2000 gives us a clear picture. And I note one pretty much exactly echoed in the UK. Over the course of the last century, the number of workers employed as domestic servants in industry and in the farm sector has collapsed dramatically. At the same time, professional, managerial, clerical, sales, and service workers tripled, growing from 1/4 to 3/4 of total employment. In other words, productive jobs have, just as predicted, been largely automated away, even if you count industrial workers globally, including the toiling masses in India and China. Such workers are still not nearly so large a percentage of the world population as they used to be. Yeah, from the one video, right, 100 years ago or so, farming and food production was like 20% of the population, or something like that. And now it's down to like 4% of the population. Something crazy like that. But rather than allowing a massive reduction of working hours to free the world's population to pursue their own projects, pleasures, visions, and ideas, we have seen the ballooning, not even so much of the service sector as of the administrative sector, up to and including the creation of whole new industries like financial services or telemarketing, or the unprecedented expansion of sectors like corporate law, academic and health administration, human resources, and public relations. And these numbers do not even reflect all those people whose job is to provide administrative, technical, and security support for these industries, or for that matter, the whole host of ancillary industries, dog washers, all-night pizza delivery men, that only exist because everyone else is spending so much of their time working in all of the other ones. These are what I propose to call bullshit jobs. Yeah, a lot of this stuff, especially the delivery man, can be completely automated. It's as if someone were out there making up pointless jobs just for the sake of keeping us all working. And here, precisely, lies the mystery. Capitalism, this is exactly what is not supposed to happen. Sure, in the old, inefficient socialist states like the Soviet Union, where employment was considered both a right and a sacred duty, the system made up as many jobs as they had to. This is why the Soviet department stores its... This is why in the Soviet department stores, it took 3 clerks to sell a piece of meat. But of course, this is the very sort of problem market competition is supposed to fix, according to economic theory at least. According to economic theory at least, the last thing a profit-seeking firm is going to do is shell out money to workers that they don't really need to employ. Still, somehow, it happens. Well, yeah, they can employ them, though, but pay them shitty wages and make sure they work against unionization and make sure that laws get passed to keep the wages low and the benefits and all that sort of stuff. And like here, this is something that I worry about with the federal jobs guarantee. I see the value in the federal jobs guarantee, that there's a lot of good that can be done with the federal jobs guarantee. But again, it's and I had this argument with someone on Facebook, because we were talking about, it was on a resource-based economy post or something like that, specifically talking about federal jobs guarantee and UBI, and that he was against UBI and he was pro federal jobs guarantee. Actually, he was very much against the UBI, which I get his problems with it. But ultimately, if with federal jobs guarantee in the use that it could be, which is good, it could also be used to create jobs for the sake of creating jobs, just so that people have money, which in many cases the government is going to pay for. So what's the point in spending all the time and the wasted resources and administration to create a bunch of jobs when the end result is just making sure they have money? We'll just use UBI to give them money directly and fucking skip the entire middle process. Now again, it's not that there isn't a use for federal jobs guarantee, because there is. There's a lot of work that can be done and it can do a lot of good, but using it as a way of just giving people money, it's a fucking waste. So use it for what it's meant to be. Use federal jobs guaranteed to get some work done and to get things done that need to be done, not just to give people money. If you want to just give people money, just fucking give people money. Save a lot of headaches that way. While corporations may engage in ruthless downsizing, the layoffs and speed-ups invariably fall on that class of people who are actually making, moving, fixing, and maintaining things. Through some strange alchemy no one can quite explain, the number of salaried paper pushers ultimately seems to expand, and more employees find themselves, not unlike Soviet workers, actually working 40 or even 50-hour weeks on paper, but effectively working 15 hours just as Keynes predicted. Since the rest of their time is spent organizing or attending motivational seminars, updating their Facebook profiles, or downloading TV box sets. Yeah, okay, I'm okay with this. I'm down with that. I mean, it's just being there, slaving away, doing stuff that you're there to do instead of doing stuff that's really useful. It's demoralizing. And people don't want to be there. They'd rather be with their family or friends or doing something they actually enjoy than just slaving away just to have a job so they don't fucking die in the streets, right? I talk about that in my capitalism post, right? That capitalism is slavery. It's how do I use it? It's coercion. Either you work for someone else, for the most part, or either you give a job and you do something, or you and your family die in the streets. It's coercion. It's not freedom. The answer clearly isn't economic. It's moral and political. The ruling class has figured out that a happy and productive population with free time on their hands is a mortal danger. Think of what started to happen when this even began to be approximated in the 60s. And on the other hand, the feeling that work is a moral value in itself and that anyone not willing to submit themselves to some kind of intense work discipline for most of their waking hours deserves nothing. It's extraordinarily convenient for them. Yeah, exactly. And when I talk about, right, the issues, everything starting, a lot of problems starting from the 60s, that's right. That's why the war on education started, following the anti-war protest to the Vietnam War here in the United States, right? That's why the war on education started. That's when the war to make sure people were so busy that they couldn't, and lacking education, so they couldn't figure out what's going on or have the time to protest against the government and its predations all across the world. This is exactly right. Once, when contemplating the apparently endless growth of administrative responsibilities in British academic departments, I came up with one possible vision of hell. Hell is a collection of individuals who are spending the bulk of their time working on a task they don't like and are not especially good at. Say they were hired because they were excellent cabinet makers and then discover they are expected to spend a great deal of their time frying fish. Neither does the task really need to be done, at least. At least there's only a very limited numbers of fish that need to be fried. Yet somehow they all become so obsessed with resentment at the thought that some of their coworkers might be spending more time making cabinets, not doing their fair share of fish frying responsibilities. That before long, there's endless piles of useless, badly cooked fish piling up all over the workshop, and it's all that anyone really does. I think this is actually a pretty accurate description of the moral dynamics of our own economy. Now, I realize any such argument is going to run into immediate objections. For you to say what jobs are really, quote, necessary. What's necessary anyway? You're an anthropology professor. What's the need for that? And indeed, a lot of tabloid readers would take the existence of my job as the very definition of wasteful social expenditure, only if you're conservative. And on one level, this is obviously true. There can be no objective measure of social value. I would not presume to tell someone who is convinced they are making a meaningful contribution to the world that really they are not. But what about those people who are themselves convinced their jobs are meaningless? Not long ago, I got back in touch with a school friend who I hadn't seen since I was 12. I was amazed to discover that in the interim, he had become first a poet, then the frontman in an indie rock band. I'd heard some of his songs on the radio, having no idea the singer was someone I actually knew. He was obviously brilliant, innovative, and his work had unquestionably brightened and improved the lives of people all over the world. Yet after a couple of unsuccessful albums, he'd lost his contract, and plagued with debts and a newborn daughter, ended up, as he put it, taking the default choice of so many directionless folk, law school. Now he's a corporate lawyer working in a prominent New York firm. He was the first to admit that his job was utterly meaningless, contributed nothing to the world, and in his own estimation should not really exist. There's a lot of questions one could ask here, starting with, what does it say about our society that it seems to generate an extremely limited demand for talented poet musicians, but an apparently infinite demand for specialists in corporate law? Answer: if 1% of the population controls most of the disposable wealth, what we call the market, reflects what they think is useful or important, not anybody else. But even more, it shows that most people in these jobs are ultimately aware of it. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever met a corporate lawyer who didn't think their job was bullshit. Same goes for almost all new industries outlined above. There is a whole class of salaried professionals that, should you meet them at parties and admit that you do something that might be considered interesting, an anthropologist, for example, will want to avoid even discussing their line of work entirely. Give them a few drinks and they will launch into tirades about how pointless and stupid their job really is. This is a profound psychological violence here. How can one even begin to speak of dignity in labor when one secretly feels one's job should not exist? How can it not create a sense of deep rage and resentment? Yet it is the peculiar genius of our society that its rulers have figured out a way, as in the case of fish fryers, to ensure that rage is directed precisely against those who actually do get to do meaningful work. For instance, in our society, there seems to be a general rule that the more obviously one's work benefits other people, the less one is likely to be paid for it. Again, an objective measure is hard to find, but one easy way to get a sense is to ask, what would happen were this entire class of people to simply disappear? So say what you like about nurses, garbage collectors, or mechanics. It's obvious that if they were to vanish in a puff of smoke, the results would be immediate and catastrophic. A world without teachers or dock workers would soon be in trouble, and even one without science fiction writers or ska musicians would clearly be a lesser place. It's not entirely clear how humanity would suffer were all private equity CEOs, lobbyists, PR researchers, actuaries, telemarketers, bailiffs, or legal consultants were to similarly vanish. Many suspect it might markedly improve. Yet, apart from a handful of well-touted exceptions, doctors, the rule holds surprisingly well. Even more perverse, there seems to be a broad sense that this is the way things should be. This is one of the secret strengths of right-wing populism. You can see it when tabloids whip up resentment against tube workers for paralyzing London during contract disputes. I think tube means subway. This is British slang, I think. The very fact that tube workers can paralyze London shows that their work is actually necessary, but this seems to be precisely what annoys people. It's even clearer in the US, where Republicans have had remarkable success mobilizing resentment against school teachers or auto workers, and not significantly against school administrators or auto industry managers, who actually cause the problems. For their supposedly bloated wages and benefits, it's as if they are being told, but you get to teach children or make cars, you get to have real jobs, and on top of that, you have the nerve to also expect middle-class pensions and healthcare. Yeah. Yikes. The fucking entitlement there. Fucking entitlement. If someone had designed a work regime perfectly suited to maintaining the power of finance capital, it's hard to see how they could have done a better job. Real, productive workers are relentlessly squeezed and exploited. The remainder are divided between a terrorized stratum of the universally reviled, unemployed, and a larger stratum who are basically paid to do nothing in positions designed to make them identify with the perspectives and sensibilities of the ruling class, managers, administrators, etc., and particularly its financial avatars, but at the same time, fostering a simmering resentment against anyone whose work has clear and undeniable social value. Clearly, the system was never consciously designed. It emerged for almost a century of trial and error, but it is the only explanation for why, despite our technological capacities, we are not working 3 to 4 hours a day. Yeah, and it's really also has to do with education as well. Right, because they commit this war on education, and then all the jobs that require a degree are ones that are, shall we say, glorified, and those that aren't are attacked, because that helps to reinforce, classism. And if they can enforce classism that way through basically educated and uneducated, that they can keep people separated. Okay. Class warfare. Now, I'm probably going to add something to my policies regarding this, because this I didn't even realize was a thing. These abandoned Olympic venues prove that the games are a giant waste of money. Okay, here we go. All right, questions, comments, suggestions before we move on? Ugh. This is from 2018. This article here. These abandoned Olympic venues prove the games are a giant waste of money. All right, so here's a shitload of pictures. Hosting the Olympics means footing the bill for the world's biggest sporting event and living with the consequences for a generation. Beijing spent $40 billion to play host in 2008, only to see many of its venues languish. The $51 billion bill Russia footed for the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi had fleeting returns at best. Its once gleaming Olympic Park quickly became a ghost town after the games. And don't forget Rio. The city's high hopes for its stadiums dashed when the international spotlight packed up and left after the 2016 Summer Games. Pyeongchang's $13 billion expense to host this year's Winter Olympics might seem frugal in light of the gargantuan bids from the recent past, but photos from former Olympic venues in their current states show what the future might have in store when the dust settles in South Korea. It's supposed to be a pool, right? Swimming pool? Okay, this is an aquatic center, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, from the 2016 Olympics. Okay, here is a ski jump tower in Italy, 1956. 1956, and it's still sitting there, rotting away. Bobsled track, Sarajevo, 1984. Sitting there, overgrown, doing nothing of value. Baseball stadium, Athens, Greece, from the 2004 Summer Olympics. Look, it's just fucking sitting there, rotting. All these wasted resources, all this wasted land. Olympic Village, Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, 1984 Olympics. See, nothing. Just nothing at all. Ski jump tower. Yeah, we just saw that one. Here we have a beach volleyball venue from Beijing, 2008. So it's still there. It's still in decent shape still. Main swimming pool from Greece, 2004. Yeah, falling apart. There's still water in it, though. I mean, the water looks pretty clear. I wonder if it's even still used. Swimming pool, Berlin, 1936. Like, all these places could be used for housing. I mean... So, okay, all right. So I'm thinking we need to stop doing this. If a place does the Olympics, they need to have a plan for afterwards what we're going to do with it, and design it that way so that if you're going to create this place, it's going to be a swimming pool. It's going to be open to the public and run as open to the public. The Olympic housing, okay, maybe they don't build it just for the number of people that are going to be there for the Olympics, but you build like thousands more so that you can start emptying your cities and putting them into these new, brand new state-of-the-art places with all these amenities. Olympic Sports Complex, Syria, 1984. That must be what all these housing units are. Why are these fucking housing units empty? And here we've got Athens, Greece, 2004. Training pool. Sitting there empty. Ski jumping tower, Grenoble, France, 1968. Look at that. All these wasted resources. Central Stadium, Sochi, Russia, 2014. Falling apart. Wasted resources. Jesus Christ. Olympic Canoe and Kayak Slalom Center. Look at all this. Oh my god. Bobsled track, 1984. Bosnia, Herzegovina. All right, so there you go. A bunch of images. This I wasn't really aware of, and I need to figure out what I want to do for this for my policies. Perhaps we want to create, honestly, one place in the world where this is. Kind of like, think of it like it would be one place where the Olympics could happen, and it's kept up, and it's funded by international, consortium, so that it doesn't go to waste. Perhaps that's what we need to do instead of sending it from country to country. Obviously, wherever it's going to be is going to be a huge, huge difference for wherever it is locally. Now, I understand why they send it from country to country so that, you can get tourists and all sorts of that sort of stuff going on. But this is the price we're paying. All these derelict and rotting spaces, all the waste of resources, the waste of space, and it's just sitting there. Perhaps we need to find one place where this is done, and it's open all the time, and they've got people there who are willing to train others in sports and stuff like that. Have it open to the public for swimming and track use and all that sorts of stuff. So you have sports trainers on hand, something like that. I don't know, but this has got to stop. This has to stop. Such a waste. Since I can't get DaVinci Resolve to work without a lot of work, maybe I just record it and post it to YouTube. I'm not sure. All right, so here's something. Government considers basic income grant after riots and looting in South Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa says that the government is currently investigating the feasibility of introducing a basic income grant in South Africa. Speaking at Mandela Day, at a Mandela Day memorial lecture on Sunday, 18 July, the president said that the grant would show people that the government cared, Business Daily reported. This will validate our people and show them that we are giving serious consideration to their lives. We're giving active consideration to the grinding poverty that we continue to see in our country. We need to address the structural inequalities in our economy, he said. Well, these are good words. I mean, UBI is a way to help start approach that. I'm all for that. But it's just it's a band-aid. I mean, it's going to be necessary for the future in the long term, but ultimately they need to look at the systemic and structural violence inherent to the unbridled capitalism in their country. Healthcare, education, and all that sort of stuff as well. The Congress of South African Trade Unions has also called for the introduction of basic income grant as a part of a response to the massive socioeconomic fallout from the riots in KZN and Gauteng. In response to the crisis, the South African government has no choice but to abandon its austerity framework and choose an expansionary fiscal policy framework, Kasatu said. Yeah, no fucking shit. Oh my god. Austerity is never the answer. All it does is harm people for fun and profit. That's all it does. So amazingly, whenever like the United States has done well, like World War II, the United States threw billions and billions of dollars at the people. And strangely, everything went amazingly. That's the only way to solve these problems. So throwing money at it. I mean, not, you know, it's not just the money issue, right? You have to do it responsibly, not just blindly just throwing money all over the place. But helping people out and dealing with inequality is what it's all about. And this is honestly what modern monetary theory says. It's right here. Austerity is never needed when you have your own sovereign currency. That's kind of the key there. And never do austerity and choose an expansive fiscal policy framework. UBI, universal healthcare, universal education, all that sort of stuff. And amazing things will happen. This moment calls for a change of mindset and an acknowledgement of the fact that the current unemployment and poverty levels are not sustainable. Under urgent consideration. Social Development Minister Lindiwe Zulu said that the need to introduce a basic income grant has been an urgent consideration for the government. Presenting her departmental budget speech on 25 May, Zulu said her department has developed a basic income grant discussion document that it has started consultations on. These consultations are targeted at developing the big financing mechanism for the unemployed population group that is aged 19 to 59 years. Why 19? Not 18. Oh, because they may still be in school. I see. Okay. Zulu said that a secondary process around a new basic income grant is being discussed by the NEDLAC. The ANC has previously said that it will also look at the feasibility of introducing a basic income grant as a part of a series of outcomes decided upon by its National Executive Committee. Okay, well, this is cool. I mean, it'll be good to see a company actually take this seriously and do it, and then see what happens out from it, because that's going to be, that's going to make a big difference in whether or not other countries do it. If it ends up being an amazing thing, and does all the things that we know basic income is shown to do from the places that have tried it temporarily, it's going to radically change everything for global economic, federal fiscal policy and how they do economics. And I guarantee you that if South Africa gets deep into this, that the U.S. government is going to try and tear it down, because they can't have progress for the people. So this will be interesting to see what happens from this. All right, so we got through all the anti-capitalist garbage, right? Now we're going to probably have time for just one article on COVID. So I was going to cover all this stuff first, but I found all this other anti-capitalist stuff much more interesting. All right, probably the last article for the day. Why this is from NPR from a few days ago. Why the Delta variant is hyper-contagious as a new study sheds light. I've talked about this a little bit, right? It's like 225% more contagious than the original strain, and it's also has 1,000 times the viral load. And people get sick quicker and can be contagious quicker, like within that first week. See, the numerals in this illustration show the main mutation sites of the Delta variant of the coronavirus, which is likely the most contagious version. Okay, here's the spike. The virus's spike protein, red, binds to the receptor in human cell. Okay, so this doesn't tell us anything because we don't know anything about it. Okay. After months of data collection, scientists agree the Delta variant is the most contagious version of the coronavirus worldwide. It spreads about 2 to 3 times faster than the original version of the virus, and it's currently dominating the outbreak in the United States, responsible for more than 80% of COVID cases. A new study published online this month sheds light upon why. It finds that the variant grows more rapidly inside people's respiratory tracts and to much higher levels. Researchers at the Guangdong Provincial Center for Disease Control and Prevention reported. On average, people infected with the Delta variant had about 1,000 times more copies of the virus in the respiratory tracts than those infected with the original strain of the virus, the study reported. In addition, after someone catches the Delta variant, the person likely becomes infectious sooner. On average, it took about 4 days for the Delta variant to reach detectable levels inside a person, compared with 6 days for the original coronavirus variant. Okay, there you go. Yep. That falls in line with what we've been reading about, right? In the study, scientists analyzed COVID-19 patients involved in the first outbreak of the Delta variant in mainland China, which occurred between May 21 and June 18 in Guangzhou, the capital of Guangdong province. The researchers measured the levels of the virus in 62 people involved in that outbreak and compared them with the levels in 63 patients infected in 2020 with an early version of the virus. Their findings suggest that people who have contracted the Delta variant are likely to spread the virus earlier in the course of their infection. And the scientists underscore the importance of quarantining immediately for 14 days after coming into contact with someone diagnosed with COVID-19, as the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends, even though they're in the process of saying, open everything up, don't mask. If you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask, even though people who are vaccinated are getting sick and can possibly spread it. Or even better, getting fully vaccinated. Preliminary data shows that in some U.S. states, 99.5% of COVID-19 deaths in the past few months were among people who weren't vaccinated, said CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky at a White House press conference in early July. And 97% of those currently hospitalized with COVID-19 are unvaccinated, according to Walensky. We know that the Delta variant is currently surging in pockets of the country with low vaccination rates, Walensky said. We also know that our authorized vaccines prevent severe disease, hospitalization, and death from the Delta variant. Yep, and that's what the vaccines were meant to do, so that's good. Even though the variant is more transmissible, initial hospital data shows that it doesn't increase risk of hospitalization compared to other strains, says Monica Gandhi, who studies infectious diseases at the University of California. Okay, well that's new, I think. So it isn't necessarily more deadly compared to the other strains. Okay, well there's that. Well, that was quick, so we can do one more, I think. All right, NPR, this is just from 2 days ago. Again, another one. Public health experts call on CDC to change its mask guidance because it's fucking stupid. The summer surge in COVID-19 cases is an unwelcome surprise for health officials and experts who thought for a brief period that the U.S. had the coronavirus pandemic largely under control. Who the fuck thought that? We haven't done anything to even try to control it. Whoever the hell's thinking that should be fired from their position. That's just ridiculous. This is the low season. It shouldn't be spreading as fast during the summer, says Ali Mokdad, who tracks coronavirus trends at the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington. Respiratory diseases such as flu and COVID-19 usually spike in the winter when people spend much of their time sequestered indoors. Okay, that makes sense. But now in the blazing heat of summer, hospitals in some parts of the country are again getting slammed with COVID-19 patients. Holiday gatherings over the 4th of July, which President Biden once hoped would mark the country's independence from the virus, you fucking tool, may have fueled new outbreaks. Cases, hospitalizations, and deaths are ticking up after a long decline. Of course it is. Back in mid-May, when over 1 million new people were getting vaccinated each day, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention issued guidance declaring that it was safe for fully vaccinated people to shed their masks in most settings. Yeah, and you can do things you stopped doing because of the pandemic, the CDC's director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, said at the time. Yeah, and it was fucking stupid to say that. Oh my god. I was raging then, and I'm raging now. And I've got... And people are dying because of this. They didn't... They didn't have the data. They didn't have the data to show that was necessarily the way it should be. They didn't have craploads of people vaccinated, and then I bet you they have done randomized testing plus contact tracing, which the United States definitely isn't fucking doing. Then you have no way of knowing if people are getting sick and transmitting it to others, and also if people who are vaccinated get sick and they're asymptomatic, well, we won't know that, and then they may be getting, infected, asymptomatic, and maybe getting other people sick as well. They have no way of knowing that without heavy use of randomized testing. I mean, if you're not doing that in contact tracing, you have no idea what's going on. And we're not doing any of it as a country. Because why the fuck we waste time doing that? Now, with vaccination progress stalling, a growing chorus of doctors and experts is saying the CDC let up on masking too early. No shit, Sherlock. They want the nation's public health agency to call for masking and mitigation measures in areas that are suffering to stop the virus's spread. How about we just fucking do it everywhere? Because, believe it or not, people who don't give a fuck, they travel the country. Like, my area is a tourist area. People come from all around the surrounding states to come here. You can't just do the areas that are suffering. You have to do all the areas surrounding as well. We need to reduce the circulation of the virus right now, so when we start the surge in winter, we will be in a better position, Mokdad said. Sound on science, poor on policy. Well, you can't be sound on science if you're poor on policy. Right? The CDC's main guidance was based on sound science, but led to poor policies, says Dr. Ali Khan, a former CDC official who's now at the University of Nebraska Medical Center's College of Public Health. Vaccines do protect people from getting seriously ill from COVID-19, so letting vaccinated people stop wearing masks made sense. If you're a fucking idiot, sure it can make sense. Anything can make sense. Putting gerbils up your butt can make sense too. The science was strong at the time, Khan says. The CDC intended for the announcement to encourage people to get vaccinated. They've obviously never met people before. They've obviously never met, conservatives before. I mean, it did for some, says Khan, but also led to the de facto lifting of mask policies for unvaccinated people, just before the more transmissible Delta variant started to take hold. It's just the stupid. The stupid. Summer surge, he says, is the result. Those who didn't want to wear masks and didn't want to get vaccinated are out there now spreading disease to others who are not vaccinated. Timing of the guidance was off, says Jessica Malati Rivera, an infectious disease epidemiologist who has worked with the COVID tracking project. You fucking think it's off? Seriously? I mean, like, how off? A year off? Probably a year or two off? Because our country isn't doing jack shit to help deal with it? Forgive my bitterness. Because I am bitter. I'm super fucking bitter. When the Biden administration and the CDC said, if you're vaccinated, you can take off your mask, I screamed, she says, because for so long we've been talking about getting to a place where transmission is low and vaccination is high. Transmission was lower at the time, vaccination was not high, so it seemed truly premature. Yeah, no shit. The tone of the messaging also signaled to vaccinated people that they could throw caution to the wind, Rivera says. It gave people in their minds immunity passports. Exactly. It said to them, I'm vaccinated, I can go to Miami, I'm vaccinated, I can go to the party in the basement. Exactly. That's exactly it. They said, oh, okay, we can, all they hear is you don't have to wear masks if you're vaccinated. That's, the brain stops there and life goes back to normal. The messaging around lifting mask use should have been more gradual, Rivera says. You can change some of your behavior, but just don't have a rager as if the pandemic wasn't happening. Calibrating instead of eliminating. Okay, yeah, you can't do that either. You can't do this. You can't do this at all. That's not how humans work, especially Americans. Right? Keep it on until it is completely safe. Anything other than that and ragers are what's exactly going to happen. Because Americans stupid. Can you tell I have issues? Calls for more masking, especially indoors. It's not too late for the CDC to change its tune now. Yes, it is. It's way too late. You've already opened the fucking floodgates. Particularly with the more transmissible virus spreading rapidly, says Dr. Carlos De Rio, an epidemiologist at Emory University. In my mind, it would be advisable for CDC to say, given the spread of the Delta variant in our country, we would recommend that people go back to using masks indoors, particularly in areas with huge spikes in cases. Good fucking luck with that. It would be helpful for the CDC to say, if your numbers get to a certain level, you should recommend masking, he says. Yeah, but they're not going to. They're going to be fucking riots and people engaging in violence like there has been since the very beginning. I don't care if people die. I want my hamburger. I want to go to the movies. I want my haircut. Right? That amazing sociopathy that we have here in this country. Implementing indoor mask mandates for everyone, regardless of vaccination status, is the right and scientific thing to do, says IHME's Monk Dad. Yeah, no shit. That's the only way we can send a signal to the public in the United States that we're not out of danger, while we encourage more people to go and get the vaccine. Yes. Several healthcare organizations have recently called for universal masking for both vaccinated and unvaccinated people, including the National Nurses United, a large nurses union, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, who recently recommended universal masking in schools. Agreed. Rivera says this policy would be safer and easier to implement than the CDC's guidance, which offers different options for vaccinated and unvaccinated people. Yeah, and yes. Wear your fucking mask, people. Yeah, in my my Twitter stream, I've got a bunch of tweets there of people who are vaccinated who are getting sick and having to be isolated and go to the hospital. It's not, again, people think that vaccines make you immune, that there's this fucking magical field around you where you can't get it, and that's not how it works, especially the COVID vaccine. The point of the COVID vaccine is that if you do get sick, if you do get infected, that it doesn't kill you, or it's there to mitigate the symptoms. So hopefully you remain asymptomatic, show no symptoms, or at worst, you show mild symptoms like a cold, right? That's what it is. It's not an invisible field that keeps you from getting infected. It just tries to mitigate the symptoms, right? So even though you're vaccinated, you can still get infected with it, and you can also infect other people with it. And part of that is also a messaging issue that the CDC has to make sure that people understand. They need to be saying exactly kind of sort of things that I'm talking about right now. It's not magic. You can still get sick and you can get other people infected. Wear your fucking masks, you assholes. Bunch of you sociopathic assholes. Who's going to be monitoring who is vaccinated and who is unvaccinated? Teachers, administrators, parents? Rivera asks. She adds that having different rules for vaccinated, unvaccinated people creates all kinds of issues of equity and judgment and access. Yeah, that's a very good point. And I say this as someone who has a yoga studio. My wife and I own a yoga studio. Like, I was considering, well, if you don't no, actually, I don't even want us opening it all because it's not safe because of all this bullshit. No, if you're not vaccinated, stay the fuck out. But that's not enough to even save us, because as we're pointing out here, it doesn't matter. I don't even want, I'm glad we've been closed for as long as we have, because even wearing a mask isn't enough. Even 6 foot distancing isn't enough, because your breath gets out and it stays in the air for like 30 minutes, right? And then if people are walking through the studio space, all that stuff mixing up, someone there is going to have it and someone is going to get sick. So far, the CDC stands by its statement that vaccinated people do not generally need to wear masks. Bullshit. At this time, we have no intention of changing our masking guidance because we like killing people. Wrote CDC spokesperson James McDonald in bold text in an email to NPR. Okay, so we talked about this earlier when the CDC changed its guidelines for schooling, right, from 6 feet distance to 3 feet distance. This is just the CDC giving in to political pressure from the Biden administration to give them a win on COVID, right? It's nothing to do with science, as I'm talking about here. This is about politics. Them opening up, them unmasking, and all that sort of stuff has nothing to do with policy. It has nothing to do with science. It has to do with giving the Biden administration a political win. That's all this is. And they are sacrificing Americans so that the Biden administration gets that win in their column C opening up, even though people are going to get harmed in the process. In a White House press briefing on July 22nd, the CDC's Walensky described mask wearing for vaccinating people as a very individual choice. You have exceptional levels of protection from that vaccine. You yourself have exceptional levels of protection from that vaccine, but everyone doesn't. And you may choose to add an extra layer of protection by putting on a mask, she said, while also suggesting that local officials in places with large gaps in vaccination coverage and rising case rates consider additional measures. Is anyone else similarly irate at all this bullshit? The public is lulled by the fact that the summer surge is largely hitting unvaccinated young people who are more likely to survive COVID-19, says Khan. But there's a danger that the surge in cases could spill back into more vulnerable groups such as older adults and immunocompromised people. Yeah, and early off, they said that children will most likely be asymptomatic, with the original strain, but also that some children were super spreaders. Now, part of the reason is that once people hear that, children don't tend to infect others, they start thinking, okay, well, then I don't have to worry about children at all. I can do whatever I want. So children are going out and hugging and touching and doing everything they can with everyone else, and they're not wearing masks, right? And they're not doing anything to protect themselves and their families from potentially being infected. And that ends up getting people sick. There are still many people in those high-risk groups that have not yet gotten the vaccine, and it's not 100% effective. Yep, it's like 96, 97% or something like that, which is good. Meanwhile, cases are rising rapidly week over week. Okay, so and also this effectiveness, right? This efficacy of the vaccines. It's not that you can't get infected. It's not that you can't get infected. It's that it's very effective at mitigating the symptoms if you are infected. Or is it hospital? Yeah, I think it has to do, the actual math is done by hospitalization. Is that right? Hospitalization or death, I'm not sure which. But something like that, right? It mitigates the worst parts of the symptoms of it. It's not immunity. It's not immunity. Vaccinated people are still protected, but okay. As we know that, at least with the Delta variant, right, that the Delta variant is breaking through the vaccine. So sure, I expect most people who are vaccinated won't hopefully get super sick from it, but it's still wrecking people who are vaccinated and sending them to the hospital. But the more virus that's circulating in the community, the more likely it is that people, both vaccinated and unvaccinated, will get it. Yep, and not just that, but also that another variant can emerge, which will eventually make vaccines we have less and less likely to work. Much like the Delta vaccine, the Delta variant is tearing through the current vaccines, right? It also will end up having mutations so that it may end up being even more infectious or more dangerous than the current one already is as a variant, a Delta variant, the fourth, major variant of the original strain. The longer we go on, the longer we allow people to not mask and not vaccinate and allow this thing to tear through, it's going to keep evolving. And this is also another reason why sending vaccines to the emerging countries is so important, so as to prevent the variants from emerging from those areas. The fact that we have a fourth version of the original COVID-19 virus it's messed up. It never should have been allowed to happen. But capitalism says, well, we're more than willing to sacrifice people for fun and profit, right? And we covered that with Bill Gates, right? And all that horrors with him and the vaccine debacle and stuff like that, because Finland was considering open sourcing theirs. Moderna was considering open sourcing their vaccine, but capitalism told them no. What you don't want is disease to spread from younger people back into high-risk individuals, which would be a disaster, which is what I'm talking about. All right, there you go. There's my vaccine. There's my COVID-19 raging for the day. All right, my peeps, we're at the 2-hour mark. It's time for me to get going. Anyone have any questions, comments, and suggestions, or any last-minute comments, however random, before we call this a day? And again, thank you all for joining me. I really do appreciate that. Thank you for gifting me with your time. If you want to follow me up, in my about section, there's Facebook, Twitter, my blog, my policy site, my Discord as well, and all that sort of stuff, and my Patreon as well. And if you want to donate directly, there's donate links down below too, so you can check that out as well. Yeah. So I'll probably, when I get done here, I'm going to play some probably Battle Sector. Curly Bear, hey, it's good to see you. How long have you been here? How long were you lurking? I've been thinking about the Battle Sector game the whole time. Oh, about 30 minutes? Got the last half? Okay. All right. Or the last 30 minutes? Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much been all raging against COVID-19 and America's absolute total failure. So we do best. Well, I'm glad you made it. Anyone else? Before we call it a day. Yeah, so here's a few more. I'll just show you these. Vaccinated people make up 75% of recent COVID-19 cases in Singapore, but few fall ill. And then this one, Alabama schools set to fully reopen as child COVID-19 hospitalizations nearly triple in a week. Okay, good. Yeah. All right, everyone. Last call. It is crazy. It's so crazy. I mean, it's mind-boggling. It's completely mind-boggling. I can't even speak. Mind-boggling that people are, schools are considering opening up and not masking and that sort of stuff. I think my school is going to open up this coming fall, and I'm not happy about it. So we'll see what happens. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Everyone have a great weekend, and we'll see you again next week. Stay COVID-free, wear your masks, vaccinate, down with capitalism, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Just me and you, let's make up all the rules. Count to 10 and watch the stars turn blue. Watch the stars.